Doing the live dance. And hello, everybody. We are here 9 minutes late because of a technology crisis, but we made it. And that is what counts. So hello, everybody. I am HP Holo / Edie Skye on my not normal computer. I have lots of author friends and I like to interview them. And today we have, I've seen a lot of you recently.
Thank you.
Because I just had you on for Shadow Card Guardian. And then for something else too. I can't even remember what. They all just blurred together. But anyway, you've got another book coming out. So
I do.
It is MAGELIGHT from Bane Books. And so since it's a Bane book, Bane is also allowing us to stream this interview to their various channels. So thank you, Bane.
Hello,
we
Bane
love you.
friends.
Please, everybody go buy all the Bane books. And so let's see, my usual stuff. We are giving away a signed copy of MAGELIGHT. If you would like to enter to win that, go into the show notes and click the little, the relevant link. I will find the link and put it in the comments while KACEY is introducing herself, because everything is chaos and I didn't get everything set up before because of our technology whatnots. Like my microphone just decided it wasn't going to work on my other computer. And so we're having all sorts of fun with that tonight. But luckily I have my little Mac, which has never failed me. I love my little Mac. But we've already got people in the
I know the comments are already popping off. Hello, everyone.
Hey Leah, hey Melissa, hey Charlie. We're already having a fun chat. So yes. Well, KACEY, while I look up relevant links, I am going to have you introduce yourself again.
Okay.
And tell us, what book are we talking about tonight?
Okay, great. My name is KACEY Ezell. I write emotionally charged adventure, fantasy, and science fiction, which basically means that if you pick up a book by me, you're going to read a story. It's going to make you feel something, and you're going to have a good time. Not necessarily all at once. We're talking about MAGELIGHT. I have props this time.
Yes, so do I. The book fairies blessed me with my own copy. So
the book fairies. They are the best
ones.
So MAGELIGHT is it is the first book in my new fantasy adventure series. And it is the story of it is the story of a group of people that the gamers amongst you may start to recognize some of these archetypes, but it's the story of a young woman who is a sorceress, but she's not very good at being a sorceress. And in fact, she kind of sucks at it. And all her life, she's been told she's just not good enough. And through a series of unfortunate events, she suffers extreme betrayal and heartbreak at the beginning of the story. And she decides, you know what? F this noise. I'm going to take my life into my own hands. I'm going to find my own purpose. And she runs away. And being a noblewoman riding through a bandit-infested forest at night, she gets herself into trouble and then finds herself rescued and in the company of very dangerous, very attractive, very competent men
those
with
best
different specialties. And this is the part that the role play gamers, the fantasy gamers, will probably recognize, because one of the men is an accomplished warrior, former gladiator arena champion turned mercenary soldier. One of the other ones is he's a forester, so like a ranger. He's a master archer, master woods craftsman, master tracker, that kind of thing. And then the third member of this little group is a master thief and sometimes assassin. Not really like assassin for hire, but he's the guy that gets the dirty work done.
He's multi-talented. They're all
multi-talented. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. So, anyway, these three men, agree to take the job of making sure that Aelys, our sorceress, gets sent home. But unbeknownst to all of them, there are mysterious forces working in the background that threaten not only her life, but their lives as well. And so there is some accidental magic. There is some purposeful magic. There's a lot of sword and knife and arrow battles. A lot of running through the forest, and a lot of interpersonal party dynamics, right? So that is what MAGELIGHT is about.
All right, I'm looking at My computer is giving me weird messages about stuff, and so I'm trying to figure out if all of my channels are working. I think they are, but who knows? Okay, yes, they are working on my end, Glenn. I'm not entirely sure what the issue with Facebook is. It's looking okay from my end, so hopefully YouTube is guys, if anything is coming through weird, let me know in the chat and I will see if it's on my end. We're having all sorts of adventures tonight.
Oh yeah.
So, but
It's a
yeah,
good night.
on my end, it looks like everything is streaming as it should. So hopefully that will continue happening. Some people have already found the signed book form. So yay, go fill that out. That's
Good
in the
luck.
comments. I've also included a link for us impatient people who would rather just pre-order it and get it tomorrow, right? It comes out tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Okay, so Tony says YouTube is working fine. So, all right, great. We definitely know YouTube works if anybody is having difficulty with Facebook. So, yeah, I lose complete track of like book release time because I have so many author friends, and sometimes I get stuff early. It's like I have books. I know that these books do not release for months from now, but in my brain they're already out because I already have them. But
right.
Yeah. So, important question. So this is a romance. What's the spice level? This may be the most important question about the entire book.
So this is, well, can I clarify something real quick?
Yeah.
I would not call this book a romance for the simple, and this is a little bit of author splitting hairs here, okay? But the central question at the center of the story is not will they get together or won't they? It is will they survive and learn to deal with the consequences of their actions, right? So for that purpose, I don't call this a romantasy, which is a romance novel in a fantasy setting. Yeah. Instead I would call it a fantasy romance.
Yeah.
Or a fantasy with a romantic subplot, right?
That brings up one of the more fun elements of the fantasy plus romance genres, because I write men's harem fantasy romance, but it's a completely separate thing from all of the women-oriented romances. Right. And I've recently started getting into romantasy, and in the process I'm finding that romantasy is its own distinct thing from fantasy romance, which is its own distinct thing from romantic fantasy, and it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. And the distinctions are very fine, right? So I recognize that I'm splitting hairs, if you don't like romantic tension at all, this probably isn't the book for you. But if you like a little bit of love in your story, a little bit of obsession, maybe, you'll like this one. So the spice level, there is no sex on the page. I will put that right up there. There are definitely sexual situations. If this were a movie, it would probably be be rated PG-13 for sexual situations, language, and violence, because there's plenty of the latter too. But there is rather than actual graphic sex on the page, what there is a ton of tension. There's a lot of romantic tension, sexual tension, kind of like magical tension, if that is a thing. Maybe I just invented it. I don't know.
I want to hear more about the magical tension. Yeah, this is intriguing.
So basically, because Aelys isn't very powerful, she just graduated from essentially magical sorcerer college, right? But the way that magic works in this world is that mages essentially pull from the ambient energy around them and channel it through their bodies and through their neurological systems to direct it towards whatever goal that they have to accomplish. Okay. For whatever reason that we may or may not find out in the course of the story, Aelys she can sense the ambient energy around her, but she can't actually access it the way that she should, right? And so because she's never really been able to pull anything more than the barest trickle of power, she hasn't really been able to actually, she knows a lot about the theory of magic and the history of magic, but she hasn't been able to actually practice much of it because she just couldn't access the power required to do the things. And so as she is growing and learning and progressing as a character and getting better with what, her skills are growing as well, learning what she can do and what the, you know, what actually fuels this magic is something that, you know, that she and the people around her, namely, you know, her three protectors, have to deal with and have to kind of come to grips with and grapple with. And not only like, not only what fuels the magic, but what effects does the magic have as well. Yeah.
So what is the mechanism that allows her to improve her magic? Because this is kind of a subgenre that I've become fascinated with recently as well, because we've been watching Solo Leveling.
Yeah.
And there's that whole concept of the entire concept of Solo Leveling is I'm really crap at magic, but oh, suddenly here's a mechanism that allows me to be really good at it and get really OP at it. And I'm finding that I really, really like that kind of structure. And so what is Aelys's mechanism that allows her to get a grip on her magic and improve? Or is it a spoiler?
It is a spoiler. I can't tell you. But it's dramatic. Let's just say that. It is a dramatic moment. You might even call it the moment of no return, if that means anything to the writers in the group.
All right. Well, we're not going to venture into spoilers because I want everyone to be, well, surprised by it whenever the book goes. But let's see here. I want to talk about the dudes.
I did answer your spice question. Yeah.
Yeah. So we know about Aelys. Let's talk about the guys, because what led you to choose these three different archetypes? Because you list off the warrior, the forester, and the thief, and I'm like, hell yeah, those are all archetypes that I like.
Yeah.
And
so there's two sources for this, right? And when these two sort of relatively unrelated inspirations came together in my brain, that's sort of what led to, you know, this story starting to take shape in my head. The first point of inspiration is pretty obvious. I'm a tabletop role-playing gamer. I've played D&D for years. I've played other TTRPGs. I play a lot of, when I play video games, I prefer to play RPGs. And I really like the fantasy RPG genre, right? Kind of old school like that. And those are classic fantasy RPG archetypes, right? Warrior, ranger, rogue, you know, and I don't know, probably a barbarian or a caster or, you know, whatever. But I just, so part of the inspiration was just my love for fantasy roleplay gaming. But the other piece of it is, you know, you mentioned reading and writing men's adventure harem. Well, I really love to read, and I call it a guilty pleasure, but the truth is I don't really feel that guilty about it. I really love to read reverse harem, you know, why choose romance, where you have a single female main character and she has multiple male love interests, and everybody knows, you know, everybody's in on the deal, right? And one of the things that is so fascinating to me about the sort of reverse harem construct is, you know, that in some reverse harem books, they're sort of like more polyamorous, where some of the guys actually have romantic attachments between themselves as well. And those are fine. But my favorite ones are the ones where all of the romantic attention is on the woman. But between the guys, they have incredibly strong, unbreakable, like chosen family bonds, or you know, brothers in arms bonds, or something, some sort of tie to one another, usually forged by big dramatic events in their backstory, or even on the page that you might read, that binds them together with ties of affection and trust, and like, bro, I got your back, you know, I trust you with the woman I love, right? That kind of thing. So those are my favorite reverse harem stories, are the ones that have those kinds of things. But the thing is that, and I love, we mentioned it already, right? Like, I love sexy, competent, dangerous men. They're just, that's my type, right? Like, I like the bad boys. But the thing about sexy, competent, dangerous men in real life, now this is a generalization, so it obviously doesn't apply to everyone, but most of the time, men who are sexy, competent, and dangerous don't really enjoy sharing their romantic partners with other people, right? So I started thinking about, okay, well, what would be a reason that would make sense for these very like alpha men, you know, to utilize that terminology, would be, what would be a reason for them to get past the sort of natural possessiveness, or to exclude their chosen brothers from that natural possessiveness that they would normally feel about their love interest. And the first answer that came to mind was magic, right? Well, what if it was magically? What if the bond was magically enforced, right? And then comes in the question of, well, is it real love or isn't it? And that's one of the central questions at the heart of the story, is like, well, how do you know? So on a certain level, this really is a story of like choice and consent, right? You know, what is love? What is magic? What is real? What is not real? Does it matter? You know? So those are all questions that I end up, that I kind of end up playing with it throughout the course of the story. But when I put together the idea of, okay, well, so if it's magic, so that's when I started thinking about my fantasy RPGs, and I was like, well, what if it was an adventuring party, right? And that's the reason why the guys are tight, is because, you know, they've had each other's backs in all of these strange situations. And then just the story started to kind of take shape from there.
Yeah, and I'm still very early in the book. Like, I've just met Romic. Is that how you pronounce it? The warrior.
I usually use a long O, Romic.
Romic. All right.
Yeah.
And you already learned a little bit about their history together. And I mean, they're close. Just they've had a traumatic history.
Yeah.
And the trauma is a thing that unites people, and they definitely have that. And so from the very beginning, they have a very solid reason to stick together. And I like that about them from the beginning, even though I've only met one of them thus far. We've got a comment from Glenn, who says, I love these archetypes, but Forrester was the one that struck out. Very unique to Ranger. Did you want to break away from tropes, even with the familiarity to RPGs? Or did you try to stick to the tropes as hard as possible?
It wasn't so much that I wanted to break away with them as I wanted to kind of dig into and play with them, right? I wanted to sort of explore, because this was another thing that I recently talked about too, is that, you know, all three of these guys, they from the first time they show up on the page, they are very good at their jobs. Like you know, that's very clear. And so I wanted to kind of think about, okay, well, when you have like, you know, a level 0 character or a level 1 character that, you know, I mean, maybe they have a backstory or whatever, but they don't have very many skills, right? They're not very good at what they do, or no more so than usual. I guess I should say, right? You know, they're just like a normal human being. These guys are already really good at what they do. So I wanted to kind of dig into that idea of like, okay, well, what makes what in this universe, what would make sense to make a badass warrior that like people would be like, oh shit, I don't want to tangle with that dude, you know? Or, you know, why would a guy be so good at archery that he could split another competitor's arrow? Which I know that's kind of like a Hollywood thing, but it's rule
so
of cool.
Good.
Right? I had to put it in there.
It has been one of my favorite tropes since Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Like, yeah, me too. Actually, for me, it was Robin Hood, the Disney Robin Hood with the foxes.
Everything goes back to Robin Hood.
Yeah. So, you know, so it wasn't so much that I wanted to get away from the tropes as I wanted to, like, you know, dig into and explore the tropes and play with them a little bit. Yeah.
I love books that do that too, though, because I do love tropes, but I also love I love stories that will turn tropes on their head in a way that is still respectful of the genre, because you encounter so many fantasies and sci-fi novels these days, or properties in general, that try to be subversive, but in being subversive, they ultimately disrespect the taste of the people who enjoy the genre. Yeah, it's not fun. And I love stories that do it in a fun way. And this is one that sounds like it does that. Like it explores the tropes in a new but intelligent way. And
thanks. I hope so. Yeah, I do hope so.
Right.
So
have we talked about the magic system yet?
Just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. So the way that magic works is so I dabbled a little bit with quantum physics. All energy.
That was not a sentence I expected to hear in this.
I mean, in the story, not in real life. I'm not a physicist in real life, but you know, the idea that all energy is matter, or all matter is energy, and all energy is matter, right? Like they're one and the same. It's just different expressions of the same thing. I've sort of extrapolated from that. Okay, but in this universe, there is energy that can be manipulated by people who have a certain of a certain bloodline, of a certain genetic code, right?
Mhm.
And so if you can sense this magic, theoretically, you can also manipulate it. And the way that you would manipulate it is you pull it into yourself, use your body as almost like a fulcrum, your body and your brain as like a fulcrum. And then you and you shape it according to your will, to like whatever your goal is. And the mechanism by which you shape it is usually formed by some sort of ritual, whether it's like speaking magic words or using spell components, or oftentimes a combination of both. And the complexity of the task dictates the complexity of the ritual that is required to focus the energy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what Aelys learned at the Lyceum Belli, which is the name of magical sorcerer college in this world, it was a lot of the like theory behind crafting these rituals, what some of the more common rituals are, how to focus and safely handle this amount of energy, because the energy can in fact backlash and injure you too. That's another, a danger of doing it. But it isn't like, it's very sort of, I wanted it to be pretty kind of open-ended, because this is magic as these people understand it. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end all be all of the magic in the system. Does that make sense?
Like they still have stuff to discover about the way magic works, much in the same way that we still have stuff to discover about how certain branches of physics work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Glenn says, now I'm ready for Les Johnson to jump into the chat to talk quantum physics.
I would love for Les to read my book, and then let's talk the quantum physics of MAGELIGHT, Les.
That would actually be a really fun podcast.
That would be really fun. That'd be really fun.
We have Carrie in the chat who says, good evening, love your stories and No Game for Nights and down these mean streets. Looking forward to checking out MAGELIGHT. I
hope you love it. I love this story. I'm really proud of it. This story is very near and dear to my heart. I love every book I've ever written, and I love science fiction. I love military sci-fi, and I love alternate history and lit RPG. But at my core, I'm a fantasy reader, and if I'm not reading fantasy, I'm probably reading reverse harem. So this is like the best of both worlds.
Here's a question for you. Favorite reverse harem novel or series, since a bunch of them are series?
Ooh.
There's so many to choose from.
Yeah. Okay.
Or another way to refine it is to say, which series would you recommend for people who like MAGELIGHT? Like what reverse harem series have you read that is somewhat similar to MAGELIGHT? I don't know if that makes it more complicated or simpler question.
So I have described MAGELIGHT as a book for people who want a little more fantasy in their romantasy, because MAGELIGHT is it's very fantasy heavy. It's very plot heavy. And readers of reverse harem and romance in general, they exist on a spectrum of how much they want plot. Some of them genuinely just want the smut and the longing, and once they have the smut and the longing, they don't give they don't care what else is going on in the world. I don't want any plot. I just want smut and longing. It's like, okay.
I read everything on that spectrum. Like sometimes I pick up a book, and if there is not smut 2 chapters in, I'm just going to throw it across the book. It just depends upon my mood. But then
absolutely,
one of the things I remember when I first got into romantasy in particular is I would see all these books where people would say, oh, the world building is so great. And then I would read the book, and it immediately became obvious that the people who were calling this world building great had never read a
They existed on the smut and longing end of the spectrum.
Not to condescend, but there's definitely a distinct audience for which fantasy is a hinge on which the romance can happen. And I'm very much someone who innately, I want more fantasy with my romance. Sometimes I'm just in a smutty mood and I want just absolute smut to read, but I love interesting magic systems. I love complex world building. And if there's some smut in it, if there's some romance in it, and I'm kind of right in the middle of that spectrum. And MAGELIGHT sounds like it is right perfectly in the kind of stuff that I like.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going for, is to be kind of right there in the middle. So back to your original question about reverse harem novels that people who liked MAGELIGHT might like. Probably, and I didn't realize at the time that this is what it was. but the actual reverse harem series that I ever read was Laurel K. Hamilton's Mary Gentry series.
Oh, yeah.
So the main character is a princess of fairy, born on the American continent. And at the beginning of the story, she's actually a private detective. So it's got a little noir in it too, which I always love. But she essentially, you know, has to build a harem of her guards and try to get pregnant in order to become the next queen of the Unseelie court. And there is a lot of sex. That series is a lot steamier than Magelight is.
Moving that up my list.
but one of the things that I loved so much about that series was the individual personalities of the various men in it, especially Doyle. Like if you go check out the first book's called The Kiss of Shadows. When you read it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I see why KACEY likes Doyle. So yeah, it's but yeah, it's the magic in that series is similar to the magic in Magelight, although in that series it's all Laurel infused a lot of like mythology and Celtic myth and things like that into that series, which beautifully done, right? I loved it. But the because of who the character is, the magic in that system really ties into like the emotions and the interpersonal dynamics of the characters, which is also something that I did in Magelight. Kind of tying into your earlier question about the magic system, it is affected by the way that people feel toward one another. It affects the way that people feel towards one another. So it's that intersection of emotion and magic. And maybe they're the same, maybe they're not the same. I left it open-ended on purpose because the characters don't fully understand the connection either.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, we got some more activity in the comments. So
I know you guys are so great in the chat.
Saying, Vil has the best steamy scene, IMO, and Melissa says Charlie fully agrees. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And it's Marisa. Hey, Marisa. Yay! Marisa says, yay! Oh, it's a part of the chat. Melissa says Team Vil.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Vil.
Oh,
which one is he?
Let's talk about
I haven't met him yet.
Vil's the rogue. Vil's the thief. And Vil is of the three. So quick rundown of the boys, the men in the story. They were boys together. They grew up together up until the age of 12 in the same village. And one day when they were out playing in the woods together, the three of them, bandits came, attacked their village, slaughtered everybody and burned it to the ground. And they came back and saw that this had happened. And then the three of them were like 12 years old. What do we do? And so they spent one scared cold night together in a cave that they had been playing in. And then the next morning they got into this really heated argument because of course they're traumatized and they're scared, and they separated and never saw each other again for 20 years. And had trauma happen to them, afterwards. Vil probably had the most traumatic backstory of the three of them, because after that happened, he wandered in the forest for probably about 2 weeks until he happened on the edge of to like a farmstead on the edge of a big city that we later find out is the city of Severus, which is the city right next to Magical Sorcerer College. He tries to steal some food, gets caught, but the homeowner is like kind to him, feeds him, cleans him up, and then drugs his food and sells him to a brothel in the city, where he is informed that if he does not service the client properly, he will be killed. So Vil chooses option 3, steals the client's knife from the boot, knifes the client in the groin, and escapes out the window after stealing, some money or whatever. But when the money runs out, he was reduced to begging. And this city the city is, unbeknownst to him, basically ruled by the Thieves Guild, which also controls like beggars and pickpockets and whatnot. And he's not part of them. So he gets beaten down and then taken to the leader of the Thieves Guild, who's like, would you have anything to do with this rich merchant's son who was knifed in this brothel? And nobody, up to that point, nobody had made that connection. And so Vil basically admits to it and is told, all right, well, I'm not going to kill you because they were breaking my rules. They're not supposed to have underage sex workers at this brothel. Like that's, and this guy's like the head of the Thieves Guild. So he brings Vil into the family, teaches, has him taught about how to be skillful. And, he basically becomes like a second story, like a burglar, a cat burglar kind type. And does dirty work for the family. So not a soft existence.
Yes.
Right. So when we meet Vil, he has left that life and sought out his old friends who were basically the last people he can ever remember fully trusting. None of these three men, they've all had very lonely existences. They've never had anyone that they can trust since the time that they separated in the woods that day. And that is very important to like the sequence of events that follows when they return to one another. Vil is incredibly suspicious. He does not trust easily. He is incredibly dark, and he is
honestly, I don't blame him.
Right, as you would be, right? Like with a backstory like that, as you would be. But he's also eminently practical, and when he becomes obsessed with something, he's obsessed with it forever. And there is absolutely nothing he will not do to protect the ones that he cares about, So
I know this has a serious connotation, but the first thing I think of is like dudes who like Warhammer. And it's like, I just pictured him lugging this massive Warhammer collection around. And I know that it's not even close.
But if he was into Warhammer, he'd be really into Warhammer.
Yes.
Yeah, no. What Vil is into getting paid. Vil is into protecting his brothers, and due to the events of the story, Vil is into protecting Aelys. So yeah.
And fully on genre for the romance stuff. Like I love one of my favorite things about like regardless of what subgenre of romance it is, whether it's fantasy romance, romantic fantasy, or romantasy or whatever, I love the protective dude. And that's a trope that I feel like that is one of the very few tropes that carries between both men's and women's romance. And it really surprises me that that no one's really written anything that kind of combines the two. I mean, there's some that kind of do it, but it's one of those, it is the most consistent similarity that I notice between the two. And I love it so much.
Yeah, I do too. And all three of the guys have it, right? Like they all have their own, they all have that same protective instinct, but it manifests in very different ways for all three of them, which was really fun to do and really fun to play with. So, and continues to be fun as I'm writing the sequel.
Yes. Does the sequel have a planned release date yet, or is it still like way early?
No, it's still I'm about almost exactly halfway through the draft. So
nice. So that's still a good chunk of it written though.
Yeah, I know. I'm very excited.
We haven't talked about the third guy, so we got to cover him too. And I have completely forgotten his name, even though
his name is Dane.
Dane. All right, let's talk about him.
Yeah. Dane is the Forester. So if Vil had the most traumatic backstory, Dane arguably had the least traumatic in one way, but in another way, maybe it was even harsher, right?
I already want to hug him.
Yeah, no, Dane, they all need hugs. Dane needs hugs. Dane was, so after they separated in the forest, Dane was found by an Imperial Forester, a guy by the name of Bormer, who's a good guy. And Bormer took him in and eventually raised him as his own foster son. And eventually, due to Dane's wishes, sponsored Dane into the Imperial Forestry organization. The problem is that the organization was not the noble, like, band of brothers who, protecting the forest and the innocent animals that Dane had grew up hearing about in stories. Instead, it's a pretty corrupt organization populated almost entirely by minor nobility and second sons of the major houses who are really just there to kind of get rich, and it's basically just a larger force of bandits. You know what I mean? So, and so Dane is very quickly disillusioned. Plus, to make matters worse, he not only does he he's disgusted by the corruption in the organization, but he also is a commoner. He wasn't born of a noble family. And so everybody who's supposed to be his brother in this organization just really ostracizes him and looks down on him. And so in something that may be a little bit of an echo of my own personality, he decides, well, I guess I'll be better than all of y'all. And so he gets really good at his job, like
I love those kinds of
incredibly good
too.
at his job, right? It's the power of spite. Never underestimate the power of spite.
Yes.
And so he gets incredibly good, and he gets incredibly like cynical, and he's the most hot-tempered of the three men, and so, but because he had actually, a semblance of a good childhood with a good family and a good relationship with his foster father, he's arguably the most hurt by the loneliness and the rejection. And so in some ways, he kind of fulfills that like golden retriever trope for Aelys, because he's the one who's nicest to her after, they find themselves bound together. He's the most patient with her. He is he seeks her out, her company out. He's also incredibly handsome. Like, of the three of them, he's the most handsome, right? So
this is an important detail.
It is an important. Now, I mean, they're all hot. Let's make that clear, right? Like, I wouldn't. Yeah.
So
all hot.
I gotta tell you this. So I made a TikTok advertising MAGELIGHT, and I always put the little stickers, like the little sparkles or whatnot on things, and my stickers, they tend to land on, I believe it's Romic's muscles, and so every time I picture this character, he has sparkly biceps in my head. And so the novel reads in some parts more hilariously than it should, because I have my own version of the novel and what it looks like going on in my head. But Romic is sparkly muscle guy to me. Yeah, so. Sure.
We'll go with that. Romic's the biggest of them, because of his warrior training. He was a gladiator, so he's got that like big gladiator musculature, and then he was a mercenary, and then Dane is tall. Dane is also pretty like well muscled because of longbow training for years and years and years. So so he's got real nice shoulders and arms. I don't know if you're a shoulder and arm girl, but for the shoulder and arm aficionados out there, enjoy Dane. And then Vil is the morally gray, borderline.
Oh, I do love a good morally gray guy too.
So that's the boys.
Whoever did the cover captured them well, I think. Who did the cover art?
Sam Kennedy.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I love that cover. I'm so happy with it. Because the thing about it, and this was actually something that Griffin Barber pointed out to me, like, it looks metallic, right? It looks like unpainted minis or partially painted minis that you would use to represent your D&D character, right?
I didn't think of it in that context, but you're right. Like I just noticed that it had that kind of cool metallic look, but I totally get the sort of miniature context now. That's cool.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a little nod to the kind of the game aspect of it.
So was that an intentional detail then?
Well, it wasn't something that I told Sam that I wanted, but when I told him, kind of my concept, in fact, I was really vague with what I wanted for the cover. And this is Bane, right? So like the cover's not up to me. So I basically sent an email to Tony and said, here are my thoughts on the cover. I understand it's not up to me, but here are my thoughts and here are my reasoning. And part of it was, if I'm perfectly honest, part of it was just marketing, right? Yeah. Bane traditionally, like isn't known for romance. It isn't known for romantasy. But romantasy is really big in the market right now. And romantasy covers tend to have kind of like a circular central element with, bold title on top and bottom, or, bold title and author name, and just very striking poppy types of covers, right? Something that's going to catch your eye. And so I did some research, looking at what were the popular fantasy romance books and fantasy adventure books, and a lot of them had that sort of cover composition. So I went to Tony with an email and just said, hey, I know that I want to do two things. One, I want to appeal to Bane's existing fantasy fans, right? I definitely don't want to leave them out, because I do think they'll like this book. And so I said, I specifically asked for something that a little bit echoed the composition of like Larry Correa's Son of the Black Sword series, where he has the dark background with the central element and then the title at top and bottom. And then I said, but I would love to have like some color elements, you know, with the three colors that you see on the cover, with the red, the black, the green, and the blue, or I guess those are four colors. Those have meaning within the story, right? Ooh. So I'd love to hint at that. You know, I'd love to have something having to do with, you know, kind of with the characters themselves. And Sam came up with this, and I remember seeing it and just being like, whoa. It was not at all what I had initially like pictured, but it was perfect. Like, it fits so well. And I love the way the Aelys looks in the front, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. It's a great cover. It's always such a good feeling when you see your cover art for the first time, and it just kicks butt right out of the gate.
Yeah. And I knew, and the thing that I loved about it is that I knew it was going to do all the things I wanted it to do. I knew it was going to draw the eye. I knew it was going to signal that it was fantasy. I knew that it was going to the romantasy fans, I knew that it was going to signal like, hey, there's a girl and three dudes on the cover. So, you know, there's some relationship stuff happening here. But I also knew that it was unique. Like, it doesn't look like anything else out there. And
it really doesn't.
And that I'm very excited about too.
And Cassie in the chat says, love the cover.
Yeah. Thanks, Cassie. Good to see you. Angela's here too. Yay.
Oh, yay. Nice. We got a good chat going this evening.
I know.
Now, let's talk. I know that every single time I go on any fantasy, romance, romantasy, whatever book group, book requests are always made basically in terms of lists of tropes. So if you were to reduce MAGELIGHT to a simple list of tropes, what would it be? I know we've mentioned some already.
Yeah. Okay. So found family. Why choose? Slow burn, because like I said, no sex on the page, just a lot of tension. Dangerous heroes, you know, morally gray. We've got the golden retriever of Dane, and then we've got like the grumpy half of Grumpy Sunshine in Romic. We've got a female main character who's discovering her power, you know, kind of finding her power. We've got politics and you know, like nobility politics kind of happening in the background that comes to the fore through the course of the story. Lots of adventure, sword fights. Yeah. So
we haven't even touched on the politics yet. And there's like, I've read exactly one chapter with Aelys in it, and there's already so many politics that she's having to deal with, because she's an heir to a significant magical family, but she sucks at magic, so that's naturally a stressor. But then there's all these other family politics going on too that she's got to think about that are stressing her out, and it's a whole thing. So so let's talk a bit about the politics of the world. How much do they factor into the adventure itself, or are they mostly background kind of thing?
So I would say they're probably maybe 80% background in this particular story. But the 20% that they impact the story is a significant 20%, right? So the political situation of the world itself is this is an empire, something sort of akin to like the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire, but with a little bit more of a medieval setting ish, I guess. Like if you mash together medieval Europe and the Roman or Byzantine Empire, this is what you would get, plus magic, right? So with a little bit of Renaissance thrown in for the mercenary companies. But the current emperor is, and we don't really, I just sort of like barely mention this, that there is a regency council. The current emperor is young, and so there's a regency happening with a regency council that kind of, you know, controls things in his name. The most powerful entity in the empire is the noble families. There are 20 high house noble families, and the reason that they are the most powerful is because they are the ones whose bloodlines allow them to to utilize magic. So magic is the sole province of the nobility in this world, which makes for some interesting dynamics in terms of, Aelys being a noblewoman, and then, the everybody else not being one. But the reason that these families are the ones with magic is because they're the ones who took power at the end of the last, period of anarchy and established the empire because they had magic. So, in addition to that, there's one of the empire has a number of standing forces, I guess. One of which I've already mentioned, which is the Imperial Forestry Service, that's responsible for caring for the, sort of stewardship of the empire's natural resources. But then there's also the Imperial Battlemage Corps. And that's what Aelys, that's been her dream, to join the Imperial Battlemage Corps in order to, they fight alongside the empire's conventional forces, but in order to be protected on the battlefield, each mage must forge a magical bond that is based on some sort of emotional tie, usually a romantic one, although we'll see, as you'll see if in another story that's available on Bane.com right now, sometimes it can be like a sibling bond, right? In that story, I talk about a pair of twins. And one of them is a warrior and one of them is a mage. And so the warrior's job, once bound to the mage, is this is my person. I will protect this person, even from themselves if necessary, So, so that's what Aelys wants to do with her life. And when those dreams are shattered, that's part of the heartbreak and the loss that sends her running out into the night like a crazy person.
Got 2 questions in the comments. So first one is from Carrie and says, what cool monsters exist in the Magelight world? And then after that one, we've got one from Brandig. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but it's, are magical bastards a thing, given that the nobility primarily uses magic?
So I will answer the monster question first. So there are a significant amount of magical creatures in this world. And I only really, in Magelight, this first book, we really only get to see one of them significantly. And it's this monster that I call the Goblant, which is like a portmanteau of goblin and ant.
Oh,
they're insectoid creatures that are about, as tall as a toddler, waist high-ish maybe at most on a human. But they're insectoid, they're hive mind, but they're intelligent enough to use weapons like stone weapons and intelligent enough to poison them. And they're nocturnal creatures that attack in swarms, usually as ambush predators, that they live in the forest. I also mentioned some other creatures some of them may be magical, some of them may not be magical. They're just animals that, I mentioned an aurochs, which was a real animal but is now extinct. Is, the wild forest cow. I mentioned aurochs. I mentioned something called a bear cat, which is literally like a bear and a cat, like a cat-like bear, but also a really tough predator, but not magical. So I had a lot of fun playing with sort of the fantasy elements of the world. Yeah, and we're gonna see more of those in book 2 actually. So
yay!
Yeah, and then magical bastards. I mean, people have been having children out of wedlock for years and years, as long as there's been wedlock. So yes, I guarantee magical bastards do exist. I will say though. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Was there a gunpowder and embers influence?
Oh, in the Goblants? Oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe a little. It's hard to say no, right? It's hard to say that there isn't, but it wasn't intentional. So, yeah.
What were you going to say before I interrupted you with the gunpowder
about the magical bastards? I was going to say too that in this world, the ability, the pantheon of this world is exclusively female, right? They just have goddesses, no gods, and so for that reason, amongst other reasons, it's less of a bloodline is less, it's not so much about who your father is as it is who your mother is, because it's easier to prove who your mother is than it is who your father is. So when a woman has if a commoner woman has a child with a noble man and the offspring is magical, it is entirely likely that the offspring would be brought into the noble family and brought up as part of their family, because the ability to do magic is so highly prized, right? It's the children of the couplings that don't have any magical ability. Those are the ones who have to figure out another way to kind of earn their social standing.
Well, this hour has blown by, man. I mean,
holy crap, it has.
But yeah, it's already 9 o'clock.
I didn't realize it's already 9 o'clock.
So we will start doing our usual wrap up. But before I do that, though, I do want to remind everybody that you can enter to win a signed copy of Magelight. I just put the link in the chat, and it's also in the show notes. And I'm also going to put a link to the pre-order if you want to go ahead and pre-order it. It comes out tomorrow, so ebooks will drop immediately. I imagine print books will probably either ship or arrive the same day. So I mean, well, if you're pre-ordering it now, it's probably not going to arrive tomorrow. But anyway, you should pre-order it wherever. And also, if you have enjoyed any aspect of what you have watched tonight, wherever you're watching, click the thing and subscribe and do all that stuff. And so, KACEY, if people want to get copies of this book signed, what cons and whatnot are you doing?
So I will be at LibertyCon in Chattanooga, Tennessee in like June 21st-ish timeframe. I will be at Lit RPG Con in Denver, Colorado in the middle of July. And I will be at Dragon Con over Labor Day weekend in Atlanta, Georgia, where I know for sure that we're doing a Feral for Fantasy signing at the Missing Volume, which is one of the vendors in the America's Mart. So
nice. So plenty of opportunities to get stuff signed. Oh, Carrie's in the chat again and says it's
hey, Carrie,
cool that you made your own monsters instead of recycling common known ones. Yeah,
a little at column A, a little at column B, right? Like not everything is brand new, but I did do a lot of mashing up.
I love the concept of the goblin. I mean, it's horrifying, and I don't want to meet one in real life ever. But it's such a fun portmanteau.
Yeah,
it's such a great monster design. I love it so much. Well, everyone in the chat, thank you for joining us tonight. We had a really active chat tonight. This has been a fun one. Great. And of course, KACEY, thank you for joining me. This was a blast.
Thank you for having me.
And I think that's it.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
My brain feels all off kilter because of our technology at the beginning, but we rocked it. So
yes, we made it through. Yes.
Delayed. Oh my god. Yes. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you, KACEY, for joining me again, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.